day has arrived. It is a thrill and really an honor to be part of the town hall tradition. So thank you for inviting me. Thank you all for coming in this crazy weather. Today I not only have my husband in the audience, but my parents have come down from Youngstown, New York on Saturday, through thick and thin, not complaining, calling in every hour to let me know they were okay. And today is their 59th wedding anniversary. Which is a very important day in my history, and very fitting because I'm here to talk to you about my journey. And my life, particularly my dwarfism and the arthritis that came along for the ride, has taught me that my greatest obstacles can always become our greatest opportunities if we just look and change our perspective and treat those challenges as choices. Because as soon as I looked at what was going on and I really owned it and said, this is it, what am I going to do with it? It all started to change. It's been 25 years now since my journey really began in earnest. I moved to Boston. I was 23, I recently graduated from Hamilton College. Did not know what I was going to do with my life. But in Boston, I found this little bookstore full of self-help books and books from different spiritual traditions and how different people, different cultures dealt with the darkness that befalls all of us at one time or another. And this so inspired me because I felt a deep darkness inside that I was very ashamed of. I didn't talk about, I didn't show it. People saw me as happy, but deep down I felt that I was either being punished or I was an accident, I was defective. I did not know what was I going to do with all of these strikes against me. This one author named George Osawa, he's a Japanese philosopher, and from his Buddhist background, he spoke about how the soul is given an opportunity to choose its biggest speed bump in life, be forward. And I thought, what a fascinating way to look at adversity. Why would we choose it? So I'm sharing this with my friend, Tracy Cohen, who some of you know, and we're thinking, if that's true, what incarnation were all of us thinking? But as we started to talk and laugh about it, and let our imaginations roll, and you know, Einstein, very smart dude, said, imagination is more important than knowledge. It allows our minds and our hearts to open up to new ideas, new solutions, new ways to look at that adversity. So we got laughing about this idea, and we came up with our own empowering vision of our life. And I've embellished on mine ever since. She and I decided that we had met up at the Spirit Pub, and the Spirit Pub is where all souls go to order their lifetime. And of course in spirit, you don't have a body to worry about. There's no disease, there's no death, so it's all fun and games. It's all light and laughter, and by the time we belly up to the bar to place our order, we are ready to take on the cosmos. So when I got up to the front of the line, and I looked up at this ginormous Spirit Pub menu of infinite possibilities and combinations, special of the day stood out in white. Spondylo, epiphyseal, dysplasia, dwarfism. With a generous side order of degenerative arthritis. And my guardian angel, who's right there, of course, to consult with us, I said to her, that I could really take a bite at. I want to try it. And she said, excellent choice. I just have 3 main pointers on that particular earth costume. Number 1, at your birth, the earth gods of medicine will label you immediately defect, deformed, disabled, disadvantaged, disregarded. And you will carry that as your identity for many years. And there will be many operations, including 2 brain surgeries. And I said, I think I need to check them in. But my angel reassured me that this profound human pain would stir in me such a hunger to know myself, to heal myself. And when I turned my vision towards that light, that perspective, then the darkness would work as the catapult into alternative medicine, into empowering therapy, into understanding that much of the healing starts within. And I said, okay, I'm still listening. And my angel said, number 2, your body will be a billboard for many people's fears of never fitting in, of never belonging, of never being good enough. Bullies and strangers and adults and children will stare and taunt and mock you. But, she said, this devastating isolation will awaken in you such a desire to know love and connection. And because you won't believe that you can draw it from out there, it will ultimately inspire you to look in here. And my angel said, number 3, your family will be the loving bedrock of your identity. And with silent love, they will accept you as you, not your condition. But you will misinterpret that silence as shame. And I said, oh, this is getting to be too much. She said, why? The silence is part of the plan. Because it will ignite in you such a longing to express yourself through art, through writing, through speaking, that when you turn your vision towards that light, the darkness will serve its purpose and be the catapult into true heart-to-heart communication. And it will be a bridge back to your spirit, and you can be a megaphone to remind others of their inner strength. And I said, I think I can do it. Bring it on. And my angel said, one last thing. This is very important. You're going to forget all of this. And I said, well, that part I know. Because if I remembered that I was eternal, that I was love and light, and no harm could ever come to my spirit, then this journey would be pin the tail on the lifetime without the blindfold. And we need the blindfold, the darkness, in order to make this a worthy challenge. And my angel said, and I will be with you every step of the way. And I will never leave you until you have fulfilled your reason for Where do I sign? And I know everyone here has something, some difficulty that when you're in the midst of it, it feels horrible. But on the other side, we realize it brings out a light in us that we didn't know was there before we were tested. When I began this search for meaning, I didn't know there was any purpose to my life. And it seemed to me when things happened, they would get worse. 15 years ago, I was an artist. I did not know I was a writer. And once again, the darkness was going to alert me to that. My arthritis in my shoulder got so bad that I had to give up my art business. And my art was really such a big part of who I was. My parents would tell you I drew from a very young age, loved anything to do with art. And now it looked like it was gone. When I went to the doctor, a specialist, a shoulder specialist, he took one look at my x-ray and said, I can't help you. You need a specialist. You need to go into New York City. And he gave us some referrals, and I was just devastated. He said, not only do you have arthritis, but your shoulder is irregularly formed, and it's going to take a lot of reconstruction. And I already had both my knees replaced and both my hips replaced before I was 30. And it had been such a long rehabilitation, emotionally draining, physically painful, I could not face another replacement. I said to my husband, if I go through with that, I don't think I'll make it. And I didn't mean physically. I meant that on the other side, he would not recognize me because I would be just a shadow of my former self. That was the amount of pain I was carrying around from my history. That I felt I was defined by my physical body, the limits that I had. And it was actually going to be the 2 later surgeries that would free me from this idea that I had to carry it. It had been my choice all along. So in the midst of quite a long pity party for myself and a depression over losing my art business, over losing my future, my father, genius that he is, suggested that I try computer graphics with my left hand. And I thought, I don't want to give up the brush and the pen and this immediacy that I always loved. But I could no longer really hold a brush and a pen, and I could hold a mouse. And he offered to pay for the computer, and if I never made money with computer graphics, I didn't have to pay it back. So my husband and I whisked off to get a computer, came home, Bill got it up and rolling, and before I could start on computer graphics, I fell in love with email. Such a beautiful curse. But it provided for me a new means of communication and a new expression and creativity that I felt I'd lost with the loss of my arm. And I started writing to friends and family, and they were responding to what I considered a curse, what I considered an incredible devastation. And as we wrote back and forth, and I wrote and wrote and wrote, and realized all of this baggage I've been holding onto that had been limiting me, not my physical self, but up here and in here, in my life, how life was trying to bring me back around. Get rid of that notion that because we don't have certain things, or we don't look like certain people, or we can't do certain things, that there isn't more to us. And this writing was the most therapeutic thing I've ever done for the whole me. And it started from what I saw as a tragedy. And my book, which I realized I was writing one night when Bill got home from work and he was in making dinner, because he's a fabulous cook. And I remember he was flipping polenta. And it smelled like an Italian restaurant. It always does. And I was telling him about what I'd been writing, and I was sort of objectively looking at where my life had gone. And I said to him, I can't believe how long I've been selling myself short. And I stopped. And he stopped. And I said, that sounds like a book. I said, I think I'm writing a book. He says, it's been such a healing for me. Maybe it could help others. Now that did not become the title. My memoir is nothing short of joy. There was a book out at the time called Don't Sell Yourself Short, also about dwarfism. And my editor said, oh, no. God forbid they buy that one by mistake. So my husband and two friends and I were brainstorming one night, and we came up with Nothing Short of Joy, which is really the second half of my life. So much more appropriate and more positive. What I learned from selling myself short was that the possibility of joy is there for everyone. When my book was, well, not a book yet, it was a manuscript, my editor suggested I get endorsements from other authors or well-renowned people I admired. And the first person I thought of was Wayne Dyer, who is a world-renowned author. He is the top dog in the self-help field. His work had helped me through many a tough time. And I listened to his tapes, sometimes day after day after day, to reprogram my own negative thinking, which was the number one obstacle in my life. And his peace and his wisdom was replacing those old lies about myself. And I used to put on a Walkman, and when I had to go to the grocery store or the post office or some place that was scary for me, someone might laugh, someone might tease me, I would listen to him. So he was so meaningful to me. And even though people said, you are not going to hear from Wayne Dyer. I'm a nobody writer. I had no experience writing. It was a miracle that I actually found an agent and a publisher when I had no platform, as they call it. I had no audience. And publishers do not really want to take a chance on a nobody writer because they want to sell books. And if you don't have an audience already and you're not a celebrity, it's going to take something else. But they believed in my story, and they took me on. And Wayne Dyer, I wrote the letter because I was starting to learn that we were the only things in the way of our dreams, and I might as well give it a try. I wrote him. Many weeks later, I get back a FedEx envelope, and I see the return address is Wayne Dyer. I open it up, and there's several copies of his movie called The Ship, and a little handwritten note from him saying he'd love to endorse my book. I was over the moon. And I didn't know it was going to get better. I quickly FedExed my manuscript off to him. About 6 weeks later, my husband and my two sons, we have two 7 and 11-year-old boys, were coming home from a birthday bowling party. And Bill gets in first, and he hits the play button on our answering machine. And whose magnificent voice comes out but Wayne Dyer? My home phone. I didn't even hear the message. I was screaming so loud applause. It was a moment I will always remember. And it was going to get better. I returned his call. I could barely speak. I didn't know, do I call him Wayne? Do I call him Dr. Dyer? I don't know. But as I talked to him and was so thrilled, this voice that had been in my heart all those years, talking back to me. And he invited me to attend his big event in Boston. And I said, I will be there. I quickly called my publisher, can we have the books ready for November 16th? And she said, for Wayne Dyer, I will print them myself. She was, of course, pretty much over the moon as well, because an endorsement from a famous author is a prize in their business. So I bounced my books up to Boston, behind me, through the streets, and I'm thinking I'm going to sell my books in the back. But when I get there, his assistant says they have a seat for me up front, next to his daughter, Sky, who's going to sing. If any of you have seen him on PBS, he almost always has his daughter with him. She has a beautiful voice. And I think, oh, I'm going to meet Sky. Because he's famous to me on every level. He's my celebrity. So I'm sitting up front, and he comes down the aisle to go up, gives me a hug, and he says, I'm going to call you on stage. Can you talk for a few minutes? I said, yes. And then he walked away, and I went, oh my God. I've never spoken before a group, let alone 1,000 people, in the John Hancock beautiful amphitheater. I'm sort of sitting in my seat and twiddling my thumbs, and I notice his daughter is doing the same thing. And I think, wow, she's nervous. She's done this before. I'm going to calm myself down and think, what am I going to say? And by the time he called me up, and because of his confidence in me and his validation that I had something to say, I got up there, I spoke for a few minutes, I spoke from my truth. Wasn't rehearsed because I didn't even know. You can see this now on YouTube because I had a camera with me thinking, well, I'll get a picture of myself with Wayne Dyer. Little did I know I was going to get video of myself with Wayne Dyer. And I asked his daughter to film it. So if you put in my name on YouTube in the search box, it will come up. Now you know the backstory of why I speak so slowly while I'm up there, because I was terrified, but excited. My mom watched it and said, why are you talking so slowly? And I said, pretty much because I was terrified. But my knees didn't buckle. I didn't pass out. I did it. I walked off the stage. I felt about 10 feet tall. And he started me on this journey of speaking, which has really brought me out into the world in a way I never thought I could handle. Never thought I'd want. Why would I put this body up in front of people to be criticized, to be judged, to be laughed at the way it always was? Why would I do that? And suddenly those fears were becoming much smaller than the bigger message that was not only healing me, but I felt really helpful. And all of this inspired from one of the darkest times in my life. Because when we start to take our challenges, look at them as choices, they become this springboard they were meant to be to our spirit, to a greater joy and ease in our life. I have an example of how when we shift our perspective on a difficult circumstance or a difficult person, how things can change in miraculous ways. My husband's ex-wife, he knows the story, don't worry, was a very challenging person. And you know, through the lens of divorce, I have to give her her credit. Nobody will. But she made it difficult for us to, for instance, visit with his daughter. And always took every opportunity to tell him how he had ruined her life, she never had enough money, and it had been a mutual divorce, a mutual agreement, but 5 years down the line, she still was believing it was someone else's fault, really disempowering herself without realizing it. And when I listened to their conversations, well, Bill's end of the conversation, I think, oh my gosh, she can't even own that it's up to her now. It's not up to him to fix it. She would not allow his daughter to come to our wedding. It was very difficult. And then when I was pregnant with my first son, many years later, she said to Bill on the phone, "That woman has no business passing on her bad genetics." Now I knew people thought that, but nobody had said it out loud, especially an intelligent woman that Bill had once loved and admired. And I held on to these little resentments over the years of never meeting her, but knowing her, or thinking I did. And then when my stepdaughter was getting married, I realized, oh my gosh, now I'm going to spend a weekend with her. Will she pull anything? And I started getting worried, and we were talking together about she's unpredictable, and she doesn't seem to be aware of when she's making a scene. And we really wanted that day to go smoothly for Bill's daughter. And I was talking to a friend, and she said, you know, try that old technique. Have a conversation with her in your imagination. Einstein would be proud. And at least change your perception of who she is, because you don't really know her. No one ever really knows the other one unless they let us see all of their innocence. And everyone has goodness within. I hadn't looked for it. I'd been holding on to that resentment. And now, was it worth it over a smooth, happy day for my stepdaughter? No, I wanted to be clear of this. So I started these conversations at night. I would start off with her apologizing to me. That always made me feel better. And then I would look for common ground with her. And I knew now that I had children why she had been so fiercely protective of her daughter. I also knew she had a really rough childhood, and obviously still carrying the pain of that. And so we get talking, and she became, a regular old person to me. And by the time we finished, I'd have us laughing, and we'd hug, and she'd apologize. And then the next time I thought of it, either when I was waking up in the morning or as I went to bed at night, again, I would start this conversation, and sometimes I'd start chewing her out. Start telling her all the things she did wrong. And I go, oh, that's not the point. That's what I want to get rid of. Because if I have that in my heart, and she has it in her heart, when we come together, I didn't want anything to do with that. And knowing that if she was in a difficult place and tried something, if I was in a clear place, there'd be nothing to bounce off of. So I'd have the conversation again, and at the end of it, we'd laugh over our pettiness and our resentments, and we'd hug, and she'd apologize. And then the day came. We were out on the West Coast. We're driving up to the reception hall, where we're going to help decorate. And Bill says, oh my gosh, there's Anne. And I look, and she seems to be waiting for us, and I think, oh, ambush. She's starting it here and now, but I think, no, I'm going to come in there without any ammo. And I get out of the car, but I'm feeling kind of distracted, and I don't see the little girl. And I'm walking toward her, and I trip, and I'm stumbling right at her, and by the time I reach her, it's pretty much a horizontal And bam, right into it. And she catches me. And we end up hugging and laughing, and I apologize. And it was a great start, because to humble myself to someone who I considered an adversary was good not only for me, but for her as well. She was the mother of the bride, the hostess. And I could put myself in that position to bow to her history, to what she's gone through. She didn't hurt me any. She in fact taught me, when I fall hard. I don't really beg, so it meant a lot. And at the time, I didn't even see that this was an illustration of what I've been seeing, what I wanted to create. And that's not me. We have the power to do that when we rehearse what we'd like to see happen, not what we fear will happen, because then we'll bring all that tension, all that baggage, and then that just attracts more of the same people like us who are also like that. So when we clear away what's blocking the view, these things can unfold in a miraculous way. And she was the picture of graciousness that weekend. She even complimented Bill on his toast to his daughter, which had everyone in tears. And she came up to me and whispered, "You must be so proud of me." And when Bill and I were talking about it later, he said, "I don't remember the last time she complimented me." Now, was it my imaginary conversation? I'd like to think so. But the point is, and maybe she was having conversations with me, I don't know. But I knew that I was not going to be a part of any negativity. And I believe that ripples out into our world in some way or other. And sometimes we get these amazing illustrations of how it is working. To validate that we have that magic, but we have to also bring our own awareness to who we are, what we offer, what we no longer want to offer, what doesn't serve us anymore. I have another example of how when we set a different intention, things get rolling in our life in ways that we can't predict. About 6 months ago, had to go to the DMV to get my license renewed. Who here likes going to the DMV? No, what? Why is that? Now, in my mind, it's because they're crowded. It takes a long time. But this day, and normally I would plan to go early in the month, early in the morning, early in the day, in the week. But because my husband was suddenly called away on business, and it was a Friday, and it was noon, and it was at the end of the month. I thought, I am so dead in the water. And I'm driving over there, and I am fumbling and complaining. And then I said, what am I doing? I stopped myself. Wayne Dyer has an entire book on this subject called The Power of Intention. Tell a new story about an old pain. And so I'm driving along and I think, okay, what would I like to have happen? I'd like to have a party at the DMV. We're all stuck there anyway. Why don't they have dance music and chess and, we could have fun. So I start thinking, what would I like to see in the atmosphere? The DMV has never operated so efficiently. The employees are friendly and helpful, and I know where I'm going, and the lines move so fast. And by the time I get there, just this activity of telling myself what I like to see got me in a better mood. So I think, okay, no matter what happens, I'm going to hold on to this, because joy is sometimes just a thought away, just a renewed perspective. And why would I want to sit there bored and angry? The to reprove your identity to get your license again. And then the man says, wow, the line is moving really quickly. I said, it is. And I looked at the front of the line at the two women who are kind of the gatekeepers for the next line. And one of them looks kind of somber. She's not looking at the person she's working with. But the other one is very animated. And she's eye contact even as she's doing the paperwork. And she reminds me a little of Joan Rivers. And I think, I want to get in Joan's line. But a couple in front of me land in Joan's line and think, oh, I'm going to have the somber salad. But oh well, maybe I can brighten her day. But Joan is so efficient. There's a couple goes on and I land in front of her. And I'm so happy, I greet her like an old friend. I said, hi, how are you? And she says, babe, how are you? I said, I feel great. This line is moving like lightning. And I think it's because of your efficiency. And she said, thank you, but wait for the next line, babe. And I said, well, you know what? I'm going to enjoy it anyway. And she said, atta girl. And so she gets my paperwork done, and off I go. And then I hear something, and I turn, and it's Joan calling me. And I think, oh, I forgot something. So I walk toward her, and we're sort of both walking toward the counter where you get your picture taken. And she says, sweetheart, cash, credit, check? And I said, oh, credit. And I reached to get it. She said, no, go sit down, we'll call you in a few. Which is DMV lingo for an hour. So I sat down next to this bored-looking woman. I said, how long have you been here? She said, 45 minutes. She said, all those people are ahead of us. And I said, all right, I guess I'll get out my book. So I pull my book out, get my little bag of cookies, and before I can even start reading, I hear my name again. So it's Ernest line 5. And I look, and there's no one in line 5. So I go over. The woman asks for my stuff. I hand it that way. This must be, again, something preliminary to really get the goods. And she starts working away, and I start talking to the woman next to me. This is something I learned from my parents. It always makes the time go faster if you find someone interesting to chat. And she tells me about the coat she's wearing. It's from Kohl's. It's this beautiful floral. And she bought it for herself on her 50th birthday. So she was divorced and it had been a very rough year. And by the time we're finished talking, the woman hands me some paperwork and I look down. And it looks like a new license. And it said, is this my new license? She said, you're done. It had been 10 minutes. I think that only happens in Montana. I walked out. It was a beautiful day. I got in my car, and I thought, I can't believe that. Was that my intention working? As I'm driving away, and I'm thanking my angels who I'd asked who helped me make the party at the DFB, and I realized, oh, it was Joan, and I didn't thank her. So I decided to go home, get one of my books, bring it back as a thank you. And I get home, I tell Bill, and he says, bring her one of your books. And I said, that's what I'm going to do. So I start to inscribe, I don't know her name, my DMV angel. Thank you for a magical experience I will never forget. I get there and I don't see John. I see somber Sal. So I ask Sal, is the woman you were working with still here? And she said, oh yeah, she's just behind security. And I said, what's her name? And she said, Angela. My angel. So when she came out, I gave her a big hug. She said to me, it's a 2-hour wait today, babe. I just couldn't do it to you. And I whispered in her ear, you were the answer to a prayer. Or an intention, whatever way you look at it. And she said, excuse me. And we protected each other and hugging, and I'm sure it was quite a sight for the people waiting at the DFB. We probably got some take my best self forward. Sometimes get caught in a difficult day, a difficult circumstance, but it works. This stuff really works. We are powerful beyond measure. And there are times when I watch how the world unfolds without all this negativity that used to be inside me, that was really the adversity all along. It's not my outer situation. And when I see the way life can unfold, and in particular, the way those dark times turn into the best times, if we're willing to keep the faith, keep watching. You know, my parents always talked about the silver lining, living on the bright side of life. And sometimes that was so irritating. I wanted to be sad. And that's okay too. You know, we need our time to grieve, to absorb what's happened, to look through it. But when the time's right, if we keep our heart open to it, that new meaning will present itself. That wonderful opportunity out of the adversity. I've seen it in my life over and over again. And now I feel like an agent as part of it. That I cannot just wait for someone to bestow it on me. I can eagerly participate. Be that agent of change. Be part of the solution and the answer instead of grumbling, which is so easy to do. And we hear it on the news all the time. The media would make us think that negative stuff is happening 90% of the time, when really it's just very loud. But so much good is going on inside of us, in our communities, in our homes. It's much bigger than the negative. The negative just sells. So it has a bigger voice. But we need to bring an even bigger voice of love, of peace, of being the light, holding up a higher light for others. I love the Cherokee legend called Two Wolves. It's about a grandmother talking about life with her granddaughter. And the grandmother says, in every heart there live two mighty wolves. The one wolf believes that the greatest power in the universe is the power over others. Through fear, through negativity, through anger, through bitterness, resentment, separation, through intolerance and judgment and criticism. The other wolf believes that, and that wolf, this dark wolf also, believes that we're really all out for ourselves. And we're all alone out there. The other wolf believes that the greatest power in the universe is the power to connect with others through joy, through peace, through love, through tolerance and kindness, through compassion and the power of community. And that wolf believes that we are all important, beautiful threads in the great web of life. And that in the end, we're never really alone. And the grandmother says, these two powerful wolves vie every day, sometimes every moment, for our attention, our devotion, our commitment to their quality, their way of seeing life. And the granddaughter says, well, which one will win? And the grandmother says, whichever one you feed. It's all out there. Good, bad, yucky. that we want to invite into our lives? Which are the qualities we want to hold up into our needy world? And it's always a choice. It's not really about our outer circumstances, what we're born into or what we run into. It's about how we respond to it. And that is absolutely in our power every day, every moment. And this ability, this responsibility to choose is always with us. Bob Hammarskjöld, a well-known UN delegate who wrote a lot about peace, the big peace and the inner peace. And he said, become a mirror in which the greatness of life will be reflected. We are mirrors for each other. We tend to react to what others are doing instead of respond. But if we keep our own mirror clean and clear and go within to find where we're limited ourselves, where we point at others for what they're doing when inside us we need to clean up. When we keep that mirror bright, we're not only the light ourselves, but we're reflecting it. When I started to see my struggle as a springboard to my spirit, it began to transform everything. And when we take our own darkness and see it in a new light, and realize that being human is a handicap for all of us, but it has a higher purpose. And it's there to be the catalyst, the inspiration, to bring out our true light that is temporarily under a blindfold. And sometimes it is that adversity that really tests our mettle and asks us to step forward in a bigger way. I'll leave you with a quote from my hero, Wayne Dyer, who sort of sums it up in a nice way. He says, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. Thank you for having me.